Well, welcome back to the coffee show. I'm your host, Kirk Pearson. I'm joined today by a very special guest. We're going to talk about bartending and coffee, and potentially where they meet. Today's guest is none other than 2018 world-class bartender of the year, Orlando Marzo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Kirk.
Welcome to the show. Can I ask, what makes a world-class bartender of the year? Like it just seems to me like I was doing a bit of reading about it. I didn't see there's a competition specifically that you won. Maybe it's like a on aggregate thing. How do you become a bartender of the year?
Well, technically, there is a competition called Diageo World Class, and it's been running for 15 years. This is the beginning of the 16th. So this year we're going to crown the 16th World Class bartender.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes place in about 57 countries around the world. And the competition starts in January. You basically get given a task to create a cocktail inspired by a certain era or theme, basically. And it goes a theme at the time. So through the first stage, each country goes through the preliminary phase and chooses the top 100 bartenders in that region, in that country. For example, in Australia, we had, in my year, we had about 507 entries.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah, and then you get through the top 100. They're going to give you another theme, another spirit to make a cocktail with. Mm-hmm. And then there is another, basically, phase. They choose the top 100 bartender, then the top 20, then the top 20 or the top 6, depending which country, depending the format of that year. They're going to have another 4 challenges in the capital normally. Mm-hmm. So here in Australia, we have in Sydney. And across the 3 or 4 days, there are challenges. They're meant to stimulate the competitor in different aspects, whether it's speed, whether it's efficiency, whether it's knowledge, and whether it's hosting. And then each country nominates a winner. So then we have an Australian winner. And the winner goes to represent Australia or their representative, basically, country in the final where it takes place. So this year will be in Toronto, in Canada. Mm-hmm.
Where you go?
Yeah. So then after you win, you become a judge and a mentor, if you wish, for the young generation and for the people that are entering for the first time, or maybe not the first time. And so I'll be going there as one of the past winner.
Pardon me for the strange questions. Johan's just adjusting your mic a touch there. What's like the most? This is a strange question to ask a world champion, but what's
there
the
is
most?
Not such a thing as a strange.
What's the most annoying cocktail to make? If you're working at a bar, what's like? Ah, oh, damn it, that came up.
It's interesting. So technically, one of the most complicated cocktails to make. It's a cocktail called Ramos Gin Fizz. And historically, it's not because of the ingredients, but because it's a cocktail that requires to be shaken by like 2-3 minutes by all of the bartenders. So it's quite annoying to make during service. But the most diplomatic answer I can give you is the cocktail that I actually don't want to make. And I remember when, for example, working in a restaurant and working in a bar is, that order that you're not necessarily being inspired of, or it's not necessarily by an inspiration, or that is technically wrong to have at that time of the day. And for me, it was, when people sit down, I used to come to a place which called Lûmé, was a fine dining restaurant. Mm-hmm. Sorry if I use these words. It was an elevated restaurant where we had an amazing bar program. And the beginning of the tasting menu was with that very delicate seafood component. And when people came to the bar to start the celebration 15 minutes before the booking and asking for an espresso martini, I knew that was technically wrong. So inside me, that was probably be like, I don't really want to make an espresso martini because I know it's going to ruin the experience for you later on.
Because it coats their tongue or something with?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you start from very high textural experience in your palate with very strong flavors like coffee and sugar. And you're going to dive in various, the simplicity of certain seafood components or certain dishes that maybe at that time of the day is not the right thing to have. So, often I don't like to judge or people taste because, through the years you learn that is not what you want to do, is what ultimately what the guests would like to have. And if that's okay, if they want to have an espresso martini, we'll make an espresso martini.
So if I were to condense all of that answer into one word, would it be mojito?
Probably.
That was a joke. I always hated making the mojito. When you and I met, and it's interesting you bring this up, you worked at a restaurant called Lûmé. So Lûmé was operated, head chef at the time was a guy called Sean Quaid. I actually came and did the 12-course degustation. I don't know if you remember that, but got fed and drank some unbelievable quality stuff. The best drink that I think I've still had to this day was the Wattle Seed Negroni. So, and it's interesting you bring that up as well about the martini, because one thing that coffee kind of hasn't learned to do well that bartending and alcohol's always done well is pairing drinks with food. So, how do you kind of go about that working with such a high level chef like Sean Quaid?
Great question. So I think to go and work with chefs and great people, not just chefs, but in that environment, we have amazing front of house people, amazing, hostesses and sommeliers and people that have a broad knowledge that goes just beyond the food and the drink kind of thing. And technically, when you speak about pairing, you kind of want to fall into, there are many ways, but it ultimately comes down to two. One is by contracts. The other one is by association, basically, or literally by same flavor, same taste.
So you want to go the exact opposite or kind of close to?
Exactly.
Okay.
So the chef is making like a kingfish sashimi with a juniper and yuzu gel, and you pair something that is quite delicate. It has the element of the freshness of juniper and the citrusness of yuzu, and that's kind of like you wearing a white shirt and the wall are white. You're kind of pairing, right? You're matching, and that's probably the match by similarity. The other one is when you go by contracts. So you want to contrast the juniper flavor and the yuzu flavor in the sashimi dish with something that brings maybe another layer of flavor. And maybe you want to do like a rose Negroni to have a little bit more of a bittersweet sensation in your drink that complement the plate and the dish as well, and giving it another element. And often we see this in wine when there is a progression of the wine. It's not just straightforward, but it gives a little bit more as you chew on or as you swallow the wine and so on.
Do you think Australian ingredients are somewhat underrated in a global context? Because people listening to this from abroad might not understand what wattle seed is. So it's a native Australian ingredient, and there's other things like lemon myrtle and what's that? Hibiscus.
Yeah, Rosella.
Rosella as well. Do you think Australian? Because one thing that I would love to impart on listeners that listen to this podcast from overseas is that we have the oldest living race of people in Australian Indigenous community. So like they've literally been around for 50,000 years, native culture. And there's actually some wonderful ingredients that I don't know if they're really around the world. Are things like that available in bars overseas?
If you dig down really well, probably like a place like London, the multicultural cities like New York, they can probably get access to because a few people are asking, even though there is a minority, but the minority in a big city can be bigger than another city. So you can find certain element clearly, and not everything that we have here in Australia. Not sure if underrated is the right word, but maybe we haven't found the sweet spot for those ingredients. As an outsider, and I'm European, I'm Italian, so coming to Australia, I'm still very fascinated by smelling lemon myrtle and wattle seed and rosella and the kakadu plum and so on. But living here, I can see that we don't use it as often, or even when they're using spirits, sometimes we're reluctant to embrace it. And it's like going to Italy and be like, oh, these tomatoes are amazing. The Italians don't go like, oh yeah, it grows everywhere, just give us the next thing. We're actually really proud of that flavor. I think we need to be a little bit more proud of our local ingredients. And for this instance, your water sea Negroni that you tasted was about bringing this kind of chocolatey, nutty, sesame almost like, if you remember, elements in water seed, and in a very delicate way.
To me, water seed's halfway between like tahini and maple. Like it's
tahini, that's really which is basically sesame, right? So, and because geographically where Australia is located and the arid country that we have, these botanicals and ingredients, they produce such a very strong sensation in their chemical compound and resulting in quite strong flavor profile, like lemon myrtle, has more actually lemonine, the main flavor compound of lemon, in the actual lemon. So they can be quite overpowering at times, but it's our job as makers to make sure that they don't become one-dimensional, and people can taste it without being overpowered by.
One question I wanted to make sure to ask you today is, and I think this is something coffee is becoming slowly far more aware of. Why is ice so important in a drink, and quality ice? Because I want people to know after this that there's a difference between ice made from a really well-made ice machine and ice from the supermarket or 7-Eleven or from your home freezer.
Great question. When you actually distill down what a bartender do, apart from, the many aspects of being a host and great entertainer and so on, but what we actually do with the liquid, we modify the temperature and we add dilution. That's all we do, right? So we mix 2-3 things together and we modify the temperature by increasing it, by decreasing it most of the time, unless you put in something on fire or warming it up. And you add in dilution. So ultimately the ice plays a big role in this because you want to give you the best threshold of giving the right dilution and the best temperature. And if your ice is quite sweaty, is quite small, gives you a lot of dilution quicker.
Because melts really quickly.
It melts very quickly.
Less density.
Correct, yes. So, when I remember when I started to bartend in the early 2000s, late 90s, basically, and, we have this stereotype, and some people still do to a certain extent these days. They think that less ice means more liquid. We don't. It's not really, because when you measure 30 mils of gin to make a gin and tonic, the amount of tonic then is going to go in when a glass is full of ice or half full of ice, it's going to be greater if it's with half of the ice. So you're actually diluting the drink more by adding more tonic, if it makes sense.
Yeah, right. So because less ice.
Because less ice, then there is more of the other things that you're stretching it with, And then ultimately when you see these beautiful big blocks, they are there to maintain the dilution that we have managed as close as to the time that we're giving it to you. And so that you see the drink evolving in a nicer way rather than just over diluting throughout the course of you sipping it.
Well, because one of the biggest things when Johan and I opened the cafe is that we kind of discussed this. He's like, yeah, let's just allocate $500 to get an ice machine. I'm like, no, we need to get the good stuff and I think it's been one of the best things we've done in our business. That ice machine's probably given us better return on investment than any other piece of machinery in the whole cafe. And given the way that coffee shops are going these days, like big emphasis on ice drinks, I think it's something I think more cafe owners, more people working in the industry should be aware of.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, on paper, everyone will tell you, oh, it doesn't matter. But when you actually taste a drink made with great ice and not quite so good ice, it plays a big role. Sometimes with Loro, we do experiences outside these beautiful setup bars that we know these days. So people's home and offices and third spaces and whatnot. And, we bring our own ice and our recommended ice. And sometimes, people already brought the party ice that we call so in Australia, just, cracked kind of almost like ice or, small pieces basically.
7-Eleven,
Coles, supermarket ice. And as soon as you add your bottle cocktail, even if it's delicious, it's going to dilute in a second. And that's all just water.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's all this little decision that you make that have an impact in your final drink.
One of the things that I guess is the meat of why I wanted to talk to you today is because signature drinks and like almost like mocktails have become such a big revolution in Melbourne. So you think about places like Good Measure with the Mont Blanc, place that I loved and we interviewed last week, Asoy, they've got a strawberry matcha, or things like that. They're just becoming more and more prevalent. But then there's kind of levels to it. Like a lot of people do it better than others, despite having the same thing on the menu. What's the foundation? Like, what's the formula for making a good cocktail to start with? Like, if you're going from scratch, you're making a new drink, where do you start?
I like it that you finish it, call it a cocktail. And we want to steer away from the mocktail word, because if you break down what the actual word means, like you're mocking something. And if straight away I'll tell you that this is a non-alcoholic Negroni, straight away your brain goes like, Negroni, I'm expecting this, this, and this, and all of a sudden you're not. So we like it to call it non-alcoholic cocktails.
Okay.
And the variety, as you mentioned here in Melbourne, all around the world, more than just be an amazing trend, it's great to see, because it means we are embracing more hospitality. Because for whatever reason you're not drinking that night, designated driver, religion, time in life when you just want to take a break, we have something better to offer you rather than a grapefruit juice, because orange seems obvious, a splash of honey because sugar seems obvious, splash of soda, mint sprig, and that was the non-alcoholic of the early 2000s, right? And basically it's like the most boring option. And in a place like Lûmé, where we were attracting some clientele that necessarily doesn't want to have a bottle of wine or 40 years old whiskey, but they're really particular about their tea and drinking non-alcoholic beverages often. We needed to be in a place where we needed to offer something more exciting than the two options, right? So we were stimulated enough. We had 14 non-alcoholic cocktails from 2016. So if you see some bars, they have 3 or 4. We had 14 non-alcoholic cocktails in 2016, quite a few. We are making ginger ale using this kind of spice.
Yep.
Ginger component that you expect in a ginger ale or a ginger beer, using not just local ginger, but also a little bit of mountain pepper. We were using wattle seed and making a cola with wattle seed. So both with cola nuts and wattle seed. And, we were making a drink using mountain marigold with clear apple juice that was just rested on mountain marigold. It's a beautiful plant that smells like passion fruit, ripe peach, delicious. And there were more stimulating recipes that when you approach the table and you say, this is your clarified milk punch using lacto-fermented such and such. And this is your, non-alcoholic using mountain marigold and so on. It actually stimulated conversation. And the person that was not drinking alcohol didn't feel left out. And so that was one point to your question. The other one is a foundation to be a great bartender and to make a good cocktail is ultimately, the sweet and sour kind of balance. But I think for me, goes also in the hospitality component. Is like you and I spend so much time going into the rabbit holes of what are we in life. And, I believe in anything you do, you become an expert because you're constantly learning and reading and learning and reading. You detach from the common knowledge that you actually separate yourself from these kind of people, let's call it. And ultimately, those people are the actual consumer. So a great foundation to make a good drink, you always also need to remember what are people at that time and giving like a step at a time to catch up on what you're experimenting. Because, I've been in scenarios where people are overwhelmed by just looking at your 45 cocktails on your cocktail menu, or, very complicated recipes on coffee, the people are going to come and have a flat white. And you're like, no, hold on a second. I have this beautiful geisha. I have this beautiful fermented coffee. We use coffee from Colombia. Just the conversation we had this morning was mind blowing. But the communication needs to be so important to our guests.
So let's summarize this. So let me put you an example. I'm trying to make a new drink at my shop. So contrasting sweet and sour, I've noticed like cream and foam is a big ingredient in making like coffee cocktails, I guess we'll call it these days. To give you an example, the Mont Blanc again. So it's filtered coffee sweetened with a bit of cream on top. What would your approach be to balancing a drink like that?
Okay, so first of all, when you think about a drink, it's time and occasion, I guess. And I think, I believe the reason why you're thinking about coffee needs texture, as you say, like with cream, with milk, is because you already are associated that by drinking coffee, whether you're drinking espresso, you're expecting texture, whether you're drinking a filter, you're expecting texture in a different way. You don't want your filter to have the texture of a foamy, milky cocktail, not coffee, but you want it to be kind of like silky and thin, right? So texture is a big thing you're expecting. So this is why we tend to, type in that kind of wall. So what you're kind of expecting and give you another sensation, right? So with the Mont Blanc, there is popping out a lot, or the non-Guinness, or a lot got to do as well with the appearance, the way cocktail look.
Yeah, the theater.
Some people call it theater in the making, some people call it theater in the way they look. You wanted to look like, because culturally, like, a cappuccino looks like that, but I'm not just expecting a cappuccino. All of a sudden is now on ice. The cream has been infused by something. It's not just cream, it's actually an almond latte, an almond milk that has been blended with zest of orange or lemon and so on. So you add in element, and all of a sudden you can call that a non-alcoholic cocktail.
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down. One thing I kind of gained from our discussion this morning is there's probably room for a lot of collaboration between bartenders and baristas. So, like, for example, we were talking about water, and I was talking about how, and this is a big movement in coffee at the moment, how water concentration, or the mineral concentration in water, really impacts the flavor. And that seemed a little bit foreign to you, but you're talking to me about sparkling water and ice and dilution, and that's kind of foreign to me. Do you kind of see, expanded room for collaboration there, and ways that we could improve industries through that?
Absolutely. Like, first thing I actually want to bring out that I love that in Australia, in English, we call the food and beverage business hospitality, which is not necessarily just serving food or serving drinks, but the heart of being hospitable, right? In Italian, we call it ristorazione, which is actually more associated with the actual terminology of what you do, like you work in a restaurant, right? A ristorazione. But when it comes to be working behind a bar, I love the Italian term because we call it barista. And really like a bar, or like barman, but it was really like a new terminology. But a proper Italian will tell you that the terminology is barista. And you need to be able to make martinis. You need to be able to make tea. You need to be able to serve wine. You need to be able to make coffee. So it's a one person. And, the more we detach each other, the more this collaboration needs to be brought together. It's like when you go to a restaurant, the pastry chef communicates to the person that, is deboning the fish for the entrees, and the person that works on the grill, but if you have a grill restaurant and if you have just a bakery, then these people need to be in the same room and be more connected together. So hence why I think there is room for, for all of us being together a bit more often than we are.
Let's talk about your journey now. So obviously you're from Italy. I know you spent some time in London as well, and then moving on to Australia. What differences in the scenes are there from all three countries? I'm sure there's some.
Absolutely. So, Yeah, grew up between the south and the north of Italy, let's call it, not to go too back in time. But my journey started in proper hospitality, started in Modena, which is the heart of hospitality, a lot of great restaurants and bars. People call it the city of fast cars and slow food, which I kind of like that. And, in Italy, we're very, cocktails when I was brought up in hospitality were not really a thing in the way maybe that we didn't know. But our history of embracing and drinking throughout the day has always been there. So we have meetings at lunchtime. We do have a glass of wine. We do have a Campari soda. We do have an Americano, but we know what to do, I guess. It's like a weapon that we're not shy to show around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Where here is like, oh, you don't show your weapons, but you actually have them. You use them, your private time.
In what context are we talking?
Yeah. So, and the cocktails by itself is, in the last 10 years, a lot have changed in Italian bars and whatnot. And we've been really proud of bringing the aperitivo back, the low alcohol content cocktails like Americano, spritzes, that we're really the ambassadors for. In London, in terms of differences, there is a great hotel presence, like hotel bars in hotels. There is second to none, and is really well celebrated. Probably another city you can just compare to is like New York. And but even there, like London has this very remarkable place. Where in Australia, the bars are different in their own. We make a lot of homemade ingredients here in bars in Australia, more than, for example, what I experienced in London. Like I remember that any Australian bars, like a cocktail bar, will make their own ginger ale, their own ginger beer, their own tonic water. There is a lot of homemade recipes. And another thing that was very clear for me is the Australian cocktail bars have always had an element of food. The food offering, maybe in some London bars, was quite minimal. It's changed maybe in the last 4 or 5 years, but you don't expect to have a great food offering in a cocktail bar. Where, for example, here you go to Apollo Inn, the food, you can dine there. You go to places like Birdie, where I've been recently, and the food is you can actually spend your evening there. You don't have to go for dinner.
Well,
and I love it.
It's interesting you bring up Birdie, because if you drive down Lonsdale Street here in Melbourne, you can actually see them like fermenting and jarring ingredients.
Yes,
like you said, preparing ingredients.
Yeah, and Birdie as a place is probably what a bartender's dream for many. You can see that they have the element that is not hidden of showing you how down you can go the rabbit hole, but then you can go to the menu and be like, this drink tasted exactly what the ingredients said, and that's ultimately what you want to have on the menu. Often bring into the world class. One thing that we look as a judge when we taste the drink, and we do this every day. It doesn't have to be in front of cameras. And for a cocktail competition, you can just go for a drink, and you see you're actually judging by reading the menu. You need to help formulate your words in the menu or the description of that cocktail as close as it can be. So you want to help the person. You want to help the reader. And all of this sounds like very obvious, but you can see that often can be forgotten, and, we like to romanticize a little bit what we're doing, like lacto-fermented pepperberry, or, we call it black cardamom, or we call it rosella. So people all of a sudden and like sous vide rosella with blah, blah, blah. So the common people does not know what a sous vide is, no idea what a rosella is. Then, lacto-fermented, no, everyone is familiar with, So people feel like scared, and they go to the safety spot and like, can I have an espresso martini? And you're like, oh gosh, no, we've been reading and researching and this and that. So I think sometimes simple doesn't mean you're boring. It means it's just a vehicle to give people what they expect. And you go like, hibiscus, roses, gin. And then people go like, oh my, when they have the first sip never lies. You can actually walk away and see how people react.
That's such a good line. The first sip never lies.
Yeah, you can actually see their reaction and go like, oh my goodness, it interrupts conversations. It brings up conversation, be like, oh my goodness, what is this? And like, yeah, I can taste strawberries, but it's not just a strawberry puree, and then you can be like, oh, actually we cold distill it. What? Sorry, what? Doesn't mean cold distill it. Oh, we have this machine, but if you're on the menu, you start by saying vacuum cold distillation with a rotary evaporator. They're like, oh, what is that?
Very word heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Question that just sparked into my mind. You've obviously traveled, been to a few bars, been to a few restaurants. What are like the 5 places you've got 5 drinks left to have in your life? And you can only go to have 1 drink at each. Where are you going?
Well, 5.
So what are
the
5 best bars in the world?
Feel very comfortable. 5 is very generous. Normally people go always, when it comes up to this question, go like, what is the top bar? I really struggled because I feel when you travel a lot, you have a lot of nice places and a lot of emotions that you had in these places and heartfelt moments. I definitely want to have a martini at the Connaught.
Where's that?
Is a hotel in Mayfair in London. And Ago and the team, they've just been amazing. And it was actually what we were talking about before, where what is very distinct with London, that kind of hotel bar. Some people think the hotel bars, you need to be a 3-piece suit, you need to, have a jacket on, and it feels very intimidating. The Connaught is the exact opposite of that. It makes you feel very welcoming. There is a great music, sometimes like light house music on a Friday night, which I really love. And you can really celebrate and feel yourself, whether you're wearing a t-shirt and a pair of sneakers, or you're celebrating your anniversary, or,
So that's one.
Yeah, so the Connaught in London. I had a great experience in New York bars. Sometime like dive bars in New York.
Yeah.
A place which I can't remember what it's called, but it was a Brooklyn dive bar in New York. I was there for my friend's wedding, and it was just awesome. It was probably the celebration, but the fact that it was very chill. We had delicious cocktails, unpretentious, and they had chartreuse from it was very, very old chartreuse that we were able to taste. And
what structures did you say?
Chartreuse. Chartreuse is a liqueur that is made in France, but for some time the monks were extradited, so they went back to Spain. And I believe the chartreuse we drank was actually a different recipe when they went to Spain.
So these are made like a long time ago, sort of?
Yeah, I believe chartreuse was 1506.
So you can still drink something made 500 years ago.
Me in front of the camera. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, this chartreuse was the house was founded back in the 1500s.
Right.
But this one was, when they were back in Spain. So, different recipes, whatnot.
Number 3.
Number 3, when I travel around the world, I get to experience different bars. So, Koa and Bar Leone in Hong Kong, they're really amazing. Hong Kong is like really, really vibrant, really cool. And our friend from the Italian community, Lorenzo Antinori, have opened recently, 2 years ago, I think, this bar that, just feels like Italy's in the 90s, unpretentious, really cool. Again, you can celebrate, and the cocktails are really delicious and not necessarily overly complicated. Great textures. Went to a place in Sabasta in Brazil, which was awesome. A place that was blown away by recently was Sober Company in Shanghai. And it's this bar that has almost like 3 bars within one bar. So there is a place inside which is a speakeasy bar called Tipsy. And the idea was that you come sober and you leave tipsy. And at Tipsy, you can only have 1 drink, because by the time you go to the speakeasy bar, you had drink through the other 2 environments. And that was amazing. And Shingo Gohan is a very well-known figure in the bar world, and I never met him personally. I never had the opportunity to actually sit down and have a drink with him until we went to Shanghai. And I was just blown away, not necessarily because, I had a great time, the drinks were delicious, but, when you work in the industry for quite some time, you can see behind the curtain. You can see a lot of decisions that have been made. They haven't cut corners. It must have been really hard, but they have taken those steps, from, for example, in the same environment. So it's the same door that you walk through, but there are 3 bars. And to tell the narrative and the story of 3 bars within one environment, it is really hard. It is really hard because you go down through how we're going to dress the bar, how we're going to dress the staff, how we're going to dress the cocktail menu, what does it look like? We're going to have cross recipes, or are the cocktail formulated in the same way? Are they going to talk to the same stories? And that was not like that. You know, the menu was different print of paper, different glassware, different. Yeah, it was really awesome. So highly recommend. Did we get to 5?
I think we did.
Yeah.
Give me one Melbourne though. I want one Melbourne.
Oh, one Melbourne. That's so true. Yeah. I always say, you know, you're going to spend time either in Fitzroy or in on Flinders Lane if you're in Melbourne. It's hard to give one to Melbourne. So, you know, I'm definitely going to say Above Board, you know, Bar Bellamy, Birdie. For different reasons, they are great bars, you know, like Apollo Inn. You're just finishing like, you know, bar hopping around the city, Caretaker's Cottage. You know, we are so glad to have a bar like Caretaker's Cottage here in Melbourne.
I was really sad to see the Everleigh close. That was a very recent thing, but that had this almost old school saloon vibe, and I mean that's some of the best cocktails I've ever had. That was pretty devastating to me. What did you think?
Absolutely, and for us, you know, for another reason for me is because Michael Madruzan was coming from Milk and Honey, New York. That's where he basically started this, you know, big impact that he had in his career, spending time with Sasha Petraske, which is a little bit of a godfather for some bartenders of our generation. And Sasha Petraske had a big input in the bar that I was in London called The Player, which was part of the company there was Milk and Honey in. So bars that have a strong pedigree for changing the way things were done. So even though we never worked together, and you know, I kind of felt it because the Everleigh was what I learned and what shaped me as a bartender. You know, you need to be able to make a cocktail with like 2 ingredients, not even 3, and making it delicious over and over and over and over again. And over is not just like year after year, it's like decades after decades. And the Everleigh, you know that if I take you there and we have a penicillin, will taste exactly how the penicillin tasted from day one when they open. Consumer change, and you know, we need to adapt. And yeah, so things unfortunately take different course. But you know, Michael is a very smart person, and is not just a great bartender. He has different ventures in his entrepreneur career. So we will see him back.
Yeah, I'm sure. One thing I really wanted to ask, because baristas and bartenders, they operate in different time zones, let's just say. Like, I'm such an early morning person. Every single morning, I'm up by 4 a.m. pretty much, even when on my days off, have been my whole life. That's me. Whereas, so I could never be a bartender because I'm in bed by 9 p.m. pretty much every night. So what are some of the challenges that bartenders face? So obviously late nights would be one, but for you, if you're working in a bar full time, what are some of the biggest challenges that they face?
I think when you work in any kind of entertainment industry, and probably being a bartender can fall into that, is that the perks come to you day after day, being obviously free drinks when you go to see other venues, and late night, and doors open to places that you'll be surprised they're closed for others and whatnot. And so as a young bartender, you're going to understand and make a decision quite quickly. And, you don't want to take that, pleasure away in a way. I did that. I had late nights. I enjoyed, having some free drinks. But then when you realize that you want to stay here more than just a moment in your career, that you actually want to make a profession out of it, you need to be able to call it off.
Cut it off as in
cut it off. Yeah, like not every night when you close, not every Saturday or every Friday you close your bar, you're gonna go for the next bar, and then the next bar, and then you feel bad. You need to look after yourself. You are the most important person that you probably know of.
The one, just on that, I looked at the organization that sanctions the world class, what was that called?
Diageo World Class, yeah.
Diageo World Class. I had a look, and it's almost like a resource center for bartenders across the world. And I actually signed up for it just so I could test
For
the website.
Diageo Bar Academy.
Yeah, just so I could learn some things and test the website out. But one thing I noticed was that they had this really explicit section about for young bartenders, and one of the biggest highlights of it was you need to look after yourself, because obviously some of the things that the challenges you would face is the late nights, the excess consumption of alcohol, like you're suggesting, being on your feet and all those sorts of things. So it's actually like from your governing body, effectively, a guideline on how to be the best bartender.
Exactly. And I think like I like to analogize it like when you have a sport mentor. His job is necessarily not to tell you how great football is or how great scuba diving is. He'll tell you, you know how dangerous diving can be. You know that you can tangle yourself when you're looking at the coral reef on a net and die. And what do you do in certain situations? So it's basically making sure that the people that have done it before you expose you as quick as they can, so you don't fall into these traps, you don't fall into these holes, and you can enjoy. And if you spread up, you can enjoy even further. I love when I travel around the world and celebrate with my best mates, but I can tell you that these days there are way more activities that look after ourselves. The bar are busy in the night, but so are the gyms in the morning.
Yeah.
So which is really fascinating, and maybe it's like becoming an adult and calling myself an adult. I love to start at 5 p.m. and be in bed by 11, 6-hour celebration. But because the morning after, when you wake up at 8, and I don't wake up at 8, I wake up at 5:45 with a 20 months baby in my bed. But, you can actually have more of a sprint of life, and you can enjoy the day. You can turn up and learn new things, and, perhaps open more bar, perhaps be exposed to different people in the industry. And if you just close the bar and you go for the next bar and you wake up feeling bad and you go in a, dark environment with booze, all of a sudden you becomes quite dark.
Yeah. Well, this is something that sort of transcends coffee, transcends working in bars. It's related to everyone, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like taking care of yourself outside of work so you can better perform inside of work. But even just live healthy lifestyles, because some of us, we do work in these industries where it kind of takes a little bit out of you. Like, me working in coffee, long days, lots of caffeine.
Standing on your feet all the time.
On your feet, or chefs working in the kitchen, hot environments, stressful. Like the importance of, and this is what I love about the organization kind of, having a directive, I guess, for the staff working across the world, is that like, it's just so important to look after yourself. And you're actually a great person to ask about this, because you're actively involved in running and things as well, aren't you? So
Yes, I do. Thank you for that compliment. Having a baby recently kind of enjoyed more the lunches and dinners and I can overindulge. But absolutely. I think it's almost like looking at of what is the hardest thing in the job and how can you beat it. If standing on your feet is the most the things that get you tired the most, well, exercise, learn the muscles not to be tired. I remember for me, particularly when working in high volume bars, like the player that I was working in London, we were making a lot of drinks. We were shaking every single drink. So there's a lot of muscles here, right?
Do you get sore from doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely you do. Particularly when you're young and, you're just getting into the industry. So then I started, to be honest, by the people that surrounded me, they were quite fit and they love to train and whatnot. So I started to go to the gym and swim. And, working the night was amazing. Like, I was actually enjoying it. And rather than just be drained by working in the night, or, some people sometimes take like a month off, or I'm not drinking. And now all of a sudden you can't do a whiskey tasting that is happening on a Wednesday afternoon. You can't do that because what? Because you overdone it on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday for 3 weeks. You feel so consumed by that now you need to take a month off. It's like late gratification. Just know when to do it know what is coming. And then so when it comes, you're actually enjoying it.
Yeah.
A little bit like Easter, like, you know what, I'm not going to have overindulge on chocolate for a couple of weeks because how good is that chocolate when you have it?
I mean, I've
When
just
you
been
wait
through
for
it.
that long.
And you caught me in the middle of a small batch-a-thon the other day where I just downed many pastries and wasn't expecting to bump into you there, but there I was.
That's it.
Destroying small batch pastries. And
They
it
are
was
delicious, aren't they?
fantastic. One thing that I have to ask you today, I have to remember to ask this one. In cocktails, you're able to charge quite a lot for a cocktail. Like Australian, you can charge $25 and, that's the expectation at a world-class coffee bar, and so it should be. But in coffee, we have these world-class coffees that warrant a price like that, and they're very expensive, rare coffees. Why can cocktails charge what they're worth, but a coffee can't, do you think?
So interesting question, because you said we can charge a lot for a cocktail. And I guess any industry feel like, oh, we're not even charging enough, right? And we're not. The reason why that number is quite high in the actual cocktail is because the most expensive ingredients these days in a restaurant or in a bar, it's actually labor, followed by, or probably in the same level, is alcohol taxes. In Australia, we have one of the most, I believe the second country is Iceland, one of the most, the highest taxes on alcohol in the world. So it's $104 something a liter of alcohol. So any bottle of gin, you basically pay around $30 to $35 just to the ATO, the Australian Taxation Office. So then when you go and make a cocktail and get a proper bartender to make it, so it comes quite high. So as you say, like $25, $26. And then also the business needs to be, it needs to be profitable. But in the hospitality industry, there is a lot on the stake and there's a lot of revenue that you need to take for that little margin. So other businesses don't really run like that. They take higher margin, for what the revenue is, let's say. In terms of coffee, it's an interesting one because I want to support the industry, but also we need to be cautious and careful about what we say because we also shape the industry and our voices are heard. I feel maybe I'm not educated enough in the coffee, but when people go like, oh, we should charge $12 for a coffee, I'm like, oh, really? Like, but we make a big fuss. Are we making too fuss about it?
Well,
Because it's just
because that $12 figure, did you see that on a news article or something?
Yeah.
So that's a completely fabricated figure that not even baristas.
Yeah, I know. We're trying to, elevate the bar and whatnot.
Well, but the thing is, I don't think there's a single barista in Australia that would say to you, I think a flat white in Australia should cost $12 because it's a made up figure. So I've been probably one of the most vocal people in the industry about this. So basically what's happened is they've seen the commodity price of coffee, which is like traded as a commodity on global markets, and that's doubled. And so basically what these journalists have surmised is that because that's doubled, then the cost of a coffee should double. And then they've, add a few, a bit of lenience here and there. And they say all of a sudden it's $12. And there's a restaurant body head that's kind of been quoted as saying it, and they've just run with the story. And it's completely false. But I mean, so I don't think like your standard flat white should cost like $12, but maybe more around $7. And that's kind of fair to everyone. I understand that most people don't want to pay more for coffee. I don't want to pay more for anything. So totally understand. But and I guess the original question is drawing back to like, we actually have these high quality coffees like high grown geisha from Panama and things like that. They go for, I tried the world's most expensive coffee a few months ago. I think it was $11,000 US for 1 kilo.
Wow.
Just unbelievable. Obviously, you're not going to find that too many places in the world ever. But like there's some terrific coffees out there that I think people would really, really enjoy, but they just, for whatever reason, there's just this mental obstacle to paying over $20 for one coffee.
I think is, trying to look into the spirits and the cocktails. The more we make a premium, then the least people we have because they understand it. Coffee is like an everyday kind of thing, right? Particularly grown up in Italy. We actually don't just have a morning. It's not a morning exercise. It's all day. and then that's okay to make a smaller margin, but because it's a product that, comes and goes like bread, bread, you don't have a big margin for bread. If you think, the farmer picking the grain and how sustainable that needs to be, how many people touches actually that to go to your table, by a proper artisan, baking it properly, respecting all the people affected in the supply chain. And it costs just like as cheap as $4, $6,
Yeah.
right? So if you look emotionally and philosophically around that, it's not enough. But if you make it more expensive, then you can't a lot of people can't have it, or they're now double thinking to have it or not. So it's really up to you. It's like I take it to my cocktails and spirits world. We can have, with whiskeys particularly, or brown spirits, how we call it in our category, you can go really high in what they're worth, because at a certain point is how much you love the story. It's not a technical thing. This glass costs 50 cents to make it, timed by 3, it's $1.50. It's not like that anymore. It's like, how much do you value if this glass was drunk by an important person 100 years ago, and so on, right? So, but then you can access whiskey at a certain level, so then people can appreciate this $12 geisha. But the moment that you bring every coffee at $12, I think there'll be a lot of people then, I can make it at home, or I'm cutting my coffee.
But even at $7, they're getting to that point. And I think one thing that probably we need to understand better in the industry is kind of what's going on in the economy at large. Like I looked at some figure in some politician went and bought a basket of groceries just a few days ago. And this is a kind of Australian centric figure, but I think the same basket of groceries in 2021 was almost half the price. So like it's doubled. And so like, and the cost of a coffee or a cocktail hasn't doubled. So like, I guess if I can sort of make a case for the hospitality industry here, like a lot of venues are eating the costs really.
Yes.
And you talk about, and you see the impact, beer, like craft beer, just dropping like flies in Australia because the excise tax is so expensive. And then I guess bars as well. Like the operating environment's a lot harder than it used to be. And, for coffee's got its own sort of challenges, but I guess for bars, like you're dealing with tax that's just like almost becoming unworkable.
Yeah. I think in Australia, we do have, interesting to be heard from an Italian, I would say. We do have a lot of attention for what is happening in the food and beverage world. It drives a lot of like common knowledge and culture in what is happening, that we make a day stories out of it, and people are actually paying attention. In Italy, we have so many restaurants, and some of them you never heard of, and they're just very busy. But I guess, like, how do you want it to be run? Because if you're looking for your barista to, living a life of a tech billionaire, then no, there's not there's not the industry for, you know what I mean? So there is like, when people say, oh, coffee is going up and whatever, and we need to give it back to the farmer. And then you look at some of them and they have like 3, 4, 5 businesses, and they want to live a lifestyle that, again, like a tech billionaire. I'm like, well, is it because the coffee is going up? Is it because the farmer is, asking for more? Or is it because we are entrepreneur actually more than what we can extract? What is the figure that we need to be comfortable in the food and beverage that, you can't make more than 22%, you can't, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I do. And I think this is an interesting sort of debate to have, because in coffee, we're kind of paying the price now for raw product that we should have been paying a long time ago. And because the viability of coffee has to be grown, at certain altitude with conditions, and the kind of the business structure of it as well, paying a farmer, and they get paid once a year effectively, and that has to last them for the whole year. Like, it's a really tough environment to sort of operate within. And I guess we're probably, I call it a market correction in Australia, because there's so many cafes out there really, and there's only so many customers available. And in Australia, I think it's pretty well established now and acknowledged by the industry that there's far more cafes.
Oversaturation.
There's complete and total oversaturation. So it's an interesting topic to have. Look, there's probably not much room to be like an entrepreneurial, operate like a tech billionaire. Like the market's just not that big. But having said that, though, I do think there's opportunities in all of this. And I explained this to you down at my cafe this morning. We're trying to lower our usage. Like through these challenges comes innovation. So for us, we use a lot less coffee per coffee to make one coffee, so to speak. So I think your average for an 8-ounce coffee in Australia, the average coffee usage is probably like, I don't know, 20 grams, whereas we use 12.5 the way we extract our coffee. And I think we wouldn't have felt the necessity to do that if there weren't these looming challenges of expenses and efficiency. So even though there are these challenges and it's not, there are going to be innovations, that won't solve everything for everyone, but there's like some good things to come out of it. Like I don't want people to listen to this and think that it's entirely doom and gloom. Like there are some good things to come. Do you think there's certain things like that, like what I've just spoken about, that will come in bars?
I was absolutely, like, it's interesting you bring this, what do you call it? Correction?
Market correction.
Market correction. I like that terminology. In my space, particularly as a liquor maker and distributor, really with Loro, some people look at that like, oh, this is the market of RTD or cocktails or spirits and whatnot. You can constantly analyze and be like, these are the pros, these are cons, but you got to do something, right? You're going to start somewhere, and maybe you do drive the spirits of people to celebrate and to celebrate with the right thing. But particularly looking at what makes us happy. At what point are we actually happy? I think that's what would love to see, like we can't constantly be asking for more because someone is going to stretch, right? And normally it's like the consumer, and we are consumers as well, in different areas, I guess, right? But, at some point you're going to just be happy because things will be more expensive, and that's okay with it. But, if we need to charge more because we want to get more margin and whatnot, well, then I think, and I believe we will face then the people be like, oh, no, maybe it's better if I don't have this coffee, or better if I don't have the Negroni. For us, for example, we never compromise quality for, market excitement and whatnot. We make our cocktail to a certain standard. So go back to, for example, what you do with a recipe. And we're trying to be really efficient in the way we make our recipes. Sometimes it costs us more, but the quality is outstanding, that we believe that is our strongest point. For example, not using natural extract, not using, flavoring and whatnot, and actually making it, which is really expensive. But then we believe that's what get the people excited to talk about it and really feel that is the point of difference. And we are okay to absorb that and live in that, slim space, I think, percentage.
Let's talk about what you are doing now. So obviously, if you're just tuning in, 2018 World-Class Bartender of the Year, Orlando Marzo. And so you've got your own brand of, I was about to call it ready to drink, beverages. So could you explain to us what it is you're doing now and sort of who you cater to?
Absolutely. We can, philosophically call it whatever we call it.
What do you call it?
It fits into the ready to drink category because, you do open it and it's ready to go. There is more like a premium category within the RTD. Normally people in the RTD ready to drink, we're talking about something that is quick and easy and you can kind of consume it as it is. So normally like lower ABV in a can, ready to be drunk. If you needed to serve it or something, it's more like a ready to serve. And so we make cocktails. They're ready to serve. They're in a bottle. So we make bottled cocktail. We call it loro. In Italian, loro means they and them. And it's because as a bartender, a lot of eyes go like, oh, who makes it? Oh, 2018 World Class Bartender of the Year. But we would not exist without all of the farmers, the makers of gin, of amazing wine that we use, amazing liquor maker from all around Australia and sometimes internationally as well. So we're very proud to work with all of these producers. And in Italian, when someone opens something or be like, oh, where are we going? Oh, the guys have just opened a place, You always talk about like a third person, like a third group of people. So I kind of like that. Oh, Loro, they're making this cocktail and it's crazy, like the panettone cocktail that you mentioned earlier. We kind of want to change things and celebrate in a different way. We don't follow kind of trend, but we get inspired by amazing experiences that we want to bring into a cocktail, amazing ingredients that we want to bring into an experience. A cocktail, I think, is not just the end. The experience is what fascinates us,
It's interesting that you bring that up, and I just kind of saw a parallel with us and what we do. So you've got a product called panettone, which I'm sure is a combination of different ingredients to end up tasting like that. But it's really easy for the consumer to just see the words panettone and be like, great, that sounds fantastic. I know what to expect. We've got a blend that you just tried this morning called strawberry cheesecake. And I don't really need to kind of bombard the customer with details about it. They just go, well, it tastes like strawberry cheesecake, and it's awesome. That's an interesting parallel to draw, isn't it? And do you think that it's easier for the consumer to not have to go, all right, well, this has got gin, Campari, whatever in it. It's just panettone. Is that kind of a new thing coming into bars, or?
I strongly believe so.
Yeah,
I do. And it's interesting because now I'm more connected to everyday consumer than sometime I am working behind the bar. Because the fact that you already come at the bar, that means already you probably Googled the bar, you researched it, you're there for a cocktail. So you really want to be there. Sometimes we are at places where people don't know what a Negroni is. And that's okay. I've been doing this for 20 years now. I'm so excited to give you our version of a Negroni, which is a bergamot Negroni. It's one of the flagship cocktails that we have in our collection, one of the most celebrated we have in our collection. And, we tell our guests in front of us what is a Negroni. And it's interesting that you say that because on the front of the bottle, it's exactly what we want people to know. So if you get a bottle, it says exactly what it is. It's a bergamot Negroni. If you know what a Negroni is, you're expecting bitterness, aromatic, and that kind of flavor. If you know what a bergamot is, you're expecting that kind of perfume, citrus, and that's what you get. If you want to know what we're done with it, behind the bottle, we have about from 50 to 100 words in both Italian and English. Kind of kept that, when you go and buy a beautiful perfume, it's written in English and also in French because we associate perfume making with French. We wanted to keep that kind of like DNA Italian soul without just being Italian. And at the back of the bottle, it tells you how we make it. Now, you touch an interesting point when you mention the brand. So we're very proud to work with these producers. Sometimes we name them. Sometimes we don't want to detour the conversation because also on the menu it becomes like a billboard, and it goes in both ways. People want to know if you use Campari, because you just mentioned. Sometimes people are like, oh, I don't like Campari. So then you're not gonna like the Bergamo Negroni. So we just say to you what it tastes like. It's a Bergamo Negroni. It's got gin, it's got bitter, it's got sweet vermouth. You're like, oh, that's cool. Tell me more. Oh, bergamot is a floral citrus. We get it from the Alpine Valley, near a town called Bright in northern Victoria, and it tastes like that. And people are like, oh, amazing. We use 2 types of sweet vermouth. We use 2 types of bitter. We macerate the skin of the bergamot. If we overtell you about all of these things in a bottle, can tell you detoured. At the beginning, the first year of Loro, when we were doing tasting, we're telling people, oh, we use this gin. And people are like, oh, what gin? Oh, this distillery. Oh, they're based in Brunswick. Oh, amazing. I love Brunswick. So all of a sudden, now we're talking about these things rather than what you're actually tasting. So it's kind of important. And I bring that to like hospitality. When you have a guest in front of you that you need to entertain, and sometimes you have 30, 45 seconds, how do you get the most important thing you want to communicate and to be remembered, hopefully, in that short amount of time? And we're trying to do this when we do our experiences. So with Loro, every time we have an opportunity, we're always trying to be present. What I mean is like, can you send us a sample? Can we come and do a tasting for you?
Okay.
Yes. Can we can we run a tasting for you and your decision makers? Because otherwise it's just a liquid. Otherwise it's just a beautiful, when you go to the liquor stores and you see pretty labels, it's how people are going to choose. But I love to be remembered, just like in a bar, you can have a martini in any bar in the world, but why you want to go there to that bar is because the people, the environment, the things. So this is what we're trying to do with Loro. Bring emotions to a bottle.
We've been going for probably over an hour now. Yep, but I've got a few more questions to ask. They're probably a bit more poppy. Now you've worked at some high rolling bars, some world class restaurants like Lûmé, where we met. What's the biggest transaction you've ever put through, like in money value?
Oh, interesting one. Probably like functions and whatnot. Probably around the 20K mark.
Right,
Kind of thing. But that's like, when you do a big event. And
well, for like one diner though, they got like a meal, a couple of drinks.
one diner, a couple of high-end whiskeys. Yeah. The most recent I can remember was Lûmé. But I remember also serving one of the most premium spirits we had at the Player, which is kind of cool because it means, and it's not just about that transaction. It's about what comes with it. Because if the person can't remember, and maybe I'm going too philosophical, people don't care and they just want to celebrate, they might have, they're rolling it out. But what can you remember with that transaction? If you buy like, Penfold, the Grange, or Hills of Grace to go in wine, or Johnny Walker, King George, or certain whiskey aged for 45 years, what actually do you remember for that moment? How many Negronis can you have that you can remember? When I done the consulting for Society, which opened on Collins Street, and I remember talking to the restaurateur.
That's one of the Lucas Group venues.
Chris Lucas himself. So how many Negronis can you remember? Because I can't remember every Negronis I've had. But as Society, been having the vintage spirits selection that I was very proud to establish there with the team and implement that kind of offering. All of a sudden, when talking to the guests, like, hey, you want to celebrate with a Negroni this evening? Oh, I always have a Negroni. I want to celebrate with a whiskey. No, people try to celebrate with something that is old and something is expensive, right? But you can actually celebrate with one of the cocktails that you actually like. We had we sourced Gordon's from the 1950s. We sourced Black Label Smirnoff from the 1950s. So you can have the original, quite the original, not just like the original, because we couldn't find Quina Lillet, but you could have the original Vesper Martini, or as close as to the Vesper Martini, inspired by Ian Fleming, creating a character, Vesper Lind, and so on. And these conversations for certain people are like gold, Now all of a sudden it's like, how much do you value this conversation? It's not about, I bought this bottle for 1,000, I'm going to sell it for 3,000. It's like, this is like, you never be able to have this Campari from the 1960s ever again, because it does not exist. And if it exists, these bars don't actually open it. And it's not a thing that you can just walk in any bar and have it.
That's the rationale. But I'm going to bring you back to the dollar figure. What's the biggest transaction you've ever put through?
For one person, it was probably around the $1,000 mark for a whiskey or something.
For one drink.
Yeah, for one drink. Maybe it was like a champagne. Someone bought a bottle of champagne and they passed that. Recently, a guest that I was hosting in town, an international guest, we went out and decided to celebrate. And he very kindly opened a bottle of red wine that was $8,000.
Jeez.
Yeah, and it was delicious.
So you drank some 8K wine.
Yeah, it's good.
It was nice?
It was very delicious.
Memorable? You remember that one for a while?
Yeah, I will. Yeah. And I mean, we let's be honest, we're very lucky in our industry to try rare things from the most, common people, let's call it.
Yeah. Well, I got to try the world's most expensive coffee, and I didn't have to pay for it, so that was
there you go.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
What's the biggest tip you've ever received?
About recently $4,000.
Right.
Yeah. Not to me, but I was even more proud because it was left to the place that I took them. So the tip was for the experience, which I was kind of in, but was also for the host and the people.
So obviously
when
some
to
high
pay-
rollers just come through and thought that was awesome.
Yeah, because
Here's your
people,
reward.
they love to celebrate in life, and it's an interesting. It's interesting when you talk about this taboo conversation about money. Some people just want to show it and disvalue it, and some people really want to celebrate the right moment.
And if you can disclose, who's the most famous person you've ever served?
Oh, when I saw this question coming, I was like, "Oh, sometimes I tend to forget these things." And surely, like tomorrow, the day after, be like, why did I not mention this? But I remember at the Player in London, it was this kind of like retro underground bar, very unpretentious, but it was very well known within the, let's say, VIP kind of community. And we had, a lot of cool artists. So I remember Adele came there before she was famous, and Whitney Houston came. It was really cool.
That must have been cool.
Yeah, the Chemical Brothers had the private party there. But these are more the common people that you see on every day in the world. But for me, it's not just that. I'm the fact that I was able to serve through world class. Some of the people that are the pioneers and the mentors in my career. That is like a gift for me, more than a musician. Musician is cool because a lot more people know them in the street.
Yeah.
But for what it matters for me in my world, I remember a moment during work class that in front of me, I had the person that I was dreaming and I was reading about it. It was, one of the most influential whiskey writers in the world and whiskey knowledge people in the world called Dave Broom. And one of the most contemporary bartender, Alex Kratina, one of the most contemporary hospitality person from the US. They were all in front of me, waiting for me to present. That for me was exciting.
It reminds me of the time I had a pop-up event here in Melbourne, and the World Barista Championship was here in Melbourne at the same time, and everyone came to it. You might remember the Sub-Zero coffee pop-up in 22, and all my idols came, and I think that's probably that's the one I'll remember for the rest of my life, right?
And recently I was, after the Formula One, I was hosting Melanie C from the Spice Girls.
Ooh.
If you don't remember, that's okay. I'll just show you my age.
That's Christian Horner's wife, is it?
No, the sporty one.
Oh, Sporty Spice.
Yeah, Sporty Spice. And I had a private tasting with her, with Don Julio, and it was really lovely to chat through. For somehow I was influenced by in my life, not directly, but indirectly, because my sister.
Look, I've got two sisters, and my mum used to play Spice Girls on a Saturday morning back in the early 2000s. Stop right now. Thank you very much. Need somebody with a human touch.
Yeah.
You get the pun? That's one of the Spice Girls songs.
Really?
It's their most famous one. If I'm going to insert my own into this, I once served the prince of a Middle Eastern country.
Okay.
I probably shouldn't disclose which one or who the prince was, but it was at St. Ali.
There you go.
Yeah. So that was, you had to get pat down sort of thing, doing that sort of thing. But that's a very interesting one. Last question I have for you, or I've got two short ones for you. So what would you like the listener to know about you, Orlando Marzo, that we haven't spoken about today?
What I would like to, recently, because of what I'm envision with what I'm doing, it's a lot of philosophical aspects of growing as a person and as a business. And you can see that a lot of them actually, the good, successful people, bring them very close. There is such a taboo. People say, don't bring work to life, don't bring life to work kind of thing. And the more I'm reading about it, one is part of the other. You need to acknowledge that life is with work, and how enjoyable can be work affects your life. It's impossible to switch off. So you might just really enjoying what you do. So things that make you grow as a person, as a family member, and as a business owner. That's what I'm like to listen recently.
And my last question to you. Who would you suggest that we interview? So this is something I want to start asking all the guests. You've been sitting here, you got to know me. It's a coffee podcast. We delve a little bit outside, obviously.
Yep.
Who would you suggest? Who would you like us to interview?
I think from the technical point of view, the fact that you're bringing me in, you're showing that you not just want to talk to the coffee and baristas kind of people. So from the technical point of view of learning from knowledge by recipes and whatnot, someone like a winemaker someone from like a sommelier that has a really long experience within taste and hospitality. So not just necessarily about talking about the soil and all of that, but how do they talk about the soil to people? Sometimes they're a brand, you know, they've been doing this for 100 years. And as much as they love to do edgy stuff, they also need to sell it to consumers. Sometimes are sommelier. They want to drink some stuff, but the consumer not quite. So I think those people. And if you try to grow the community of being all together, maybe like a restaurateur, someone that done something really big in that kind of space.
Give us a name. Give us one name.
Oh, a name.
I got one. I need one name.
You need a name. Or bring Loic Avril. Loic Avril from the Lucas Group. Yeah, he's a dear friend and very, very humble. Hands down, one of the best person I know in the wine industry.
Okay.
He's really amazing in what he does. In terms of restaurateur, you know, bring like a Melbourne restaurateur. Can go from, you know, Chandelier, Chris Lucas, Andrew McConnell. Ask the spicy question. Right. You know, sometimes we celebrate around the things that have worked. Sometimes it's nice to hear about what didn't work, because ultimately taught you in a hard way what you've done the next steps.
Well, you know? This is something I see value in. So not just being 100% about coffee. Obviously, we'll always be about coffee doing this. But I think I kind of see a role in enlightening the coffee community on other things. So I'm planning to get an economist on in the next few weeks to talk about how, you know, the tariffs and all that sort of thing are affecting the coffee industry. And, you know, there's value in us learning more about other industries so we can bring that knowledge back into our industry.
Correct, yeah.
And I think that applies to, you know, the alcohol world, chefs, you name it. But look, we'll wrap it up here. Orlando Marzo. If someone wants to get some Loro, some drinks by Loro, how do we do it?
Oh, super easy. Drinksbyloro.com. We ship everywhere, really, particularly in Australia. So yeah, keep an eye, drinksbyloro.com. And the moment is all about the chocolate Negroni, because Easter just passed, but we've got some exciting things coming with the panettone cocktail. It's one of the biggest release and hottest release we do every year. So watch the space, because we'll take it bigger this year.
You got a very sexy website and very sexy brand, I might say.
Thank you.
I look up to you with that. But look, let's wrap it up there. Thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate you responding and saying yes to this. We've known each other for a few years, so it's fantastic to be able to interview you. So
it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for coming on the coffee show.
Thanks.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Ciao, bello.